now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace, you're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Herut, and we got the good brother here. Brother Ra, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, brother. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Finding this whole new situation, this whole quarantine vibe, very productive, able to get a lot of different things done, get a different flow going and stuff like that. So, figuring a way to make it work, How about yourself?
Indeed. Hey, man. They say people get bored and all that. Well, when you're internalizing and studying and, looking at charts and things like that, you're never bored. So, staying busy, man, despite the situation. I'm kind of the same pretty much either way. I stay in the knowledge. So, it really doesn't bother me to kind of be in this position because this is where I usually dwell anyway. So, for me, it's all good.
Indeed. Well, before we, get too far, I want to remind you all that this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Caliprucia Astrology and our patrons on Patreon. I want to send a special shout out to them, Uncle Mahai and Kenamenti. And we got some other ones rolling in as well. We'll reveal those next episode, but we definitely appreciate our Patreons, helping us further this endeavor and taking it to the next level and whatnot. But you can find Push It Forward Media Group on Instagram and on the web at Push It Forward. That's PUSHITFWD. And of course you can follow this podcast on Instagram at Cosmic Convo. There, you can reach out to us, and there you find a link to, all of our stuff. Right. Brother Ra, how can they get in touch with you?
People have been definitely getting a hold of me, which is excellent because there's a lot of things, even though, we're not able to get out and about, we're able to still, get in and within. So, people are definitely hitting me up, and the main way to get at me is calipruciaastrology@gmail.com. That will filter over. I have everything kind of funneled into one email. So if you hit me on one of the three I'm going to give you, it'll by some means it'll get to me. So first will be calipruciaastrology@gmail.com. The second will be on Facebook, and that is Shechem Ra on Facebook, and then same thing on IG, Shechem Ra on IG as well. So either one of those would definitely tap me on the shoulder.
Indeed. So, last episode 3, again, got a good, very, very good response, a lot of good feedback, a lot of people hitting us up and stuff like that. How did you feel about, how that episode came out?
Oh man, great feedback. I was very pleased with the response that I got from the people. So, like I said, these episodes, they're just going to get better and better. We have a whole list of things that we're going to discuss this season that really just topped the cake from last season. So, folks, spread the word. We've been definitely getting new followers, which is wonderful. But these podcasts, folks, are honestly, they're almost like little classes, little lectures that you can take and apply to your own actual astrological practice, whatever it may be. So definitely tune in, and even if you're a beginner, you can go back to season 1, a lot of good information there. And if you really want to know, you definitely can hit me up as far as classes are concerned, because they're definitely coming soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, these these episodes, they're timeless. I mean, even, we do some shows that are kind of time specific, when we talk about like your Trumps and the elections and different things like that, but the principles behind it are still relevant, and the actual events that's happening around those people and stuff like that, they definitely play a role in what's happening in the future. So I mean, season 1 is not old. You go back and listen to that, binge listen to it, get caught up and everything like that, and you're still gonna be on point. And I can guarantee you, and we love all the different astrologers out there, but I can guarantee you that you're not going to find content like this anywhere else on any other platform. I can guarantee that without a doubt. So definitely we appreciate everybody's support and checking us out and helping us to get this stuff off our head, man. We got stuff rumbling around in the mind and stuff like that, wanting to share with the people. So this gives us an opportunity to do that, indeed. So moving on to today's topic. Now, what we before I go into that, brother, you got anything you wanna chime in on, or before we get into today's topic or anything like that?
No sir. Just one minor digression here. In that I put a post up this week. Folks, you may have saw it. You probably saw it on Facebook if you're following on Facebook. And it mentioned what I had mentioned earlier in regards to the nature of the illness or the virus that is kind of plaguing mankind at this time. And I mentioned it was airborne, right? Before they mentioned it, before they really kind of start prognosticating that this thing has the ability to be transmitted via air. And that's the benefit of astrology. And let me say this, we already mentioned that 2020 was going to be a doozy, but no astrologer that I know mentioned anything about a pandemic, not one. But what you can do is follow the nature of the pandemic and how the pandemic is going to manifest, or whether it's going to reinvent itself, whether it's going to transform, whether it's going to mutate, as they call it, same thing, different ways of saying the same thing, or what time you can generally see this thing is going to dissipate. That is also the benefit of astrology. So it's not just predictive as far as what's coming, but also how to navigate the current times that we're in. So definitely go back and listen to that episode and watch and see how these things unfold. I gave you some time-specific dates in that particular episode. Watch and see if those dates unfold. So with that being said, we definitely can move on to today's topic.
Indeed. So, today's topic, it was one personally, I was a little reluctant to even go this route, because I mean, from the time that we started doing this show, I had people hitting me up asking me about this topic, and I was like, man, I don't know, man. I think I want to stay away from that. But I think since we got a good little foundation under our belt and stuff like that, I think it's a good time for us to, kind of go ahead and throw a wild card in there or whatnot. There's a couple other wild card shows that's hanging around out there that we may be approaching another season or something like that. But I think it's a good time for this one and stuff like that. So last season we did a show on the relationships topic. I think it was episode 14 where we talked about the soulmate thing and stuff like that. And this season, we're gonna hit it from a little different angle. We're gonna, talk about a little bit a relationship model that, in modern terms, may be a little complex and a little controversial. And essentially, what people have been asking us about is they want to know what in astrology, what's a good indicator in a chart, or what brings about a polygamous situation, and specifically polygynous situation, astrologically. And it's definitely out there. It's definitely a foundation for. You can look in the classics; they talk about it, right? But there's also some maybe some cultural biases that sneak in there as well. That might, the way how a culture may look at it now may reflect the way how they try to look for it in a chart. So I know, Brother Ra, you've been studying this particular type of model from an astrological perspective, and what have you been seeing thus far? Or you can just even go back and kind of, I think it'd be good to give people kind of like a framework, of what is polygyny, and kind of like a historical cultural framework of it to kind of tie it into how it fits astrologically, right?
Sure. And that's a great place to start with any astrological reading that you do, is to understand the culture that you're reading it in. And for all intents and purposes, Western civilization has spread throughout the world, pretty much to every nook and cranny it could reach. If it could change that particular area to live the lifestyle and persuasion of a Western world, it already has, or it's done so, right?
Yeah.
So, the Western world has touched everything. And the Eastern world is beginning to touch the world as well. I mean, it's been touching the world since, there was a movement in the 60s, with the whole hippie movement and that kind of thing. And then this New Age kind of stuff, which borrows from the East, because the New Age is not Eastern, folks. It is New Age, right?
Yeah.
But, cultures define the way we look at any type of astrological purview. And without understanding culture, you will never render a prediction valid. Just because, the way the planets influence man, it has a broad range.
Yeah.
Right. It's not narrow. And so you'll find someone that has a very similar chart to even yourself. Let's say even in the United States of America, someone born in the slums and the ghettos of Philly, right, versus someone born in Denver, Colorado. They're going to have two different charts, even though they may be very close in nature.
Yeah.
So you have to, even those type of nuances have to be read. But when you're understanding marriage is a cultural thing, right? It always has a cultural context, no matter what. And for the most part, when you look at marriage as a culture, as a cultural aspect of civilization, there's different ways that mankind has processed this thing. And this is not to slight or be racist by any means. This is just speaking some historical fact. And there are documents and people that have done the research to substantiate the information we're about to share. And this is not a secret, but I just don't want it to come off as biased or racist. But for the most part, Western civilization has been conquered by the European man, and this type of civilization has been has looked at marriage as a very one-to-one type of situation. And understandably so, because when you understand what's called the cradle theory, you have civilizations that are birthed out of different cradles, the northern cradle and the southern cradle. And this is all backed up by some of our greatest researchers, some of our greatest minds in the African community, one of which goes by the name of Sheikh Anta Diop, or Sheikh Anta Diop. And he wrote several books, several great titles, but the one that really focuses on this subject is called The Cultural Unity of Black Africa. And the subtitle, The Domains of Matriarchy and of Patriarchy in Classical Antiquity. And it goes and explores, really, and talks about the differences in how different cultures, northern versus southern, view the same institution.
Yeah.
Or just for example, viewing just viewing people themselves. There's words that are used to describe each culture. The northern culture is xenophobic, meaning that they have a fear of people. And the southern culture is xenophilic, meaning they have a love of people. The xenophobic cultures, those being typically the northern cultures, typically don't bury their dead. They cremate their dead.
Yeah.
Southern cultures bury their dead, right? Northern cultures typically don't have a respect or a profound understanding of their a profound relationship with their elders.
Yeah.
Right? Where Southern cultures admonish, not only admonish, but uplift and revere their elders. So one acknowledges, ancestor worship, which is the Southern culture, and the Northern culture typically doesn't. I said typically. So when you understand these things, right, then you begin to understand that marriage as an institution is going to be very different from the mindset of an African versus of a European, or someone that is under the persuasion of these types of cultures. And so an African culture is going to generally yield a more communal base with regards to marriage and family and community.
Well, I don't know if you're about to go here, but you can look at it from, the perspective of how they came up, you're talking about Northern culture. They came up in a very cold, brutal type of environment, where, maybe, just even, women, to them in that environment where you're not growing crops, you don't have those things in place. So you're following herds around, and stuff like that. You're looking at it like, all right, this person is slowing me down. We almost got attacked by that wildebeest the other night because we was trying to save you. Right? The only thing you're good for is giving me an error. You know what I'm saying? Other than that, I don't need you. You know what I mean? I could see, I don't agree with it, but I can see that kind of permeate into the culture. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. There's another book by Michael Bradley. I don't know if you've heard of that one. Iceman Inheritance. Excellent book to read.
Yeah.
Excellent book to read. Another one is called Urugu by Murumba Ani. And if I was Murumba Ani's age, I'd be on you. She's a beautiful sister. Bad sister, right? One of the ones that I would really consider a true goddess, right? One sister that by far has shown us a different perspective of European culture. The book is itself, it's phenomenal. It's a thick read, but definitely worth it. But each one of those, and we can talk about Francis Cress Welsing. We could talk about what is it? He's still living. It'll come to me in a minute. But, these different, the understanding that culture itself is going to birth the way we handle an institution such as marriage.
Yeah.
Right. And so being xenophilic, right? Community is about sharing. Marriage is about sharing. Marriage is about support. Marriage is about making sure that the community, in fact, you're not marrying just one person, you're marrying a whole family.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas now we've been romanticized and westernized into thinking that, we marry somebody, right? Well, in the chart itself even holds the in-laws as one of the what we call jiva items of a chart. And we say jiva items, right? That's what you learn in the class. To understand that that a chart has two different types of dimensions to it: jiva and non-jiva, living and non-living. Well, your actual in-laws are actually inculcated into the chart itself. So astrology has already pre-programmed into it the marital process in and of itself.
Yeah.
Right. That's why we can see certain things in bar none. So understanding how this works, right? When you get to culture, right, and looking at astrology and looking at marriage and mixing them all together, you have to have a good sense of what planets are going to do what in what culture and why, right? Certain things are just pretty standard, but certain things are not. Certain things there's variables to this. Now, understanding that the xenophilic culture is going to have the support of the community, meaning that they're not going to look at the competition that's necessary in the colder environments is not necessary in the southern environments.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're getting to, is the competition that's needed, right? In order to sustain my husband, my wife, right?
Yeah.
Possession, ownership, right? Property, which is really a Western concept primarily.
Yep.
Not to say we didn't own things in Africa and things, that's not true, right? But I'm saying that in the sense of community comes first, right? Then you. In America and Western culture, is you first, then community. So the orientation is very much different.
If you even get to the communal aspect ever.
They call it the hood. What's up?
Yeah.
Your neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Right. Missing the other understanding of how this works, because your neighborhood is not just the neighborhood, it's literally an extension of your own actions.
Yeah.
Right. And where you choose to live is usually an extension. I mean, this is true, just generally speaking. You usually live around people that are an extension of what you do.
Yeah.
Right. So, but nonetheless, it's a whole nother astrological conversation. But nonetheless, we're really focusing on the cultural understanding of really how to read something in a chart to get the necessary message to say, is this the right path as far as this person for polygyny, or are they better suited for monogamy? Right.
Yeah.
And so, in the West, right, polygyny is like a bad word, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of got a negative connotation to it, right? It has a dark side, as they say, right? Like monogamy doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, it's demonized, right? And anything that's demonized has something that can be kind of looked at through an astrological lens, right? Each culture has what we consider something that is out of the norm or not in the mindset of the people, right? That that's what we call taboo, right?
Yeah.
That's outcast. You should be outcast for that, right? Or ostracized for that, right? You should be made a pariah, right? When you understand how these things work, when you look at a chart in the Western sense, you're going to be looking for a very specific combination to happen in some regard. And there's so many ways for it to happen, but you're going to be looking for it because the norm of Western society is monogamy, right? So, there's a double-edged sword to this, and we'll talk about how that works here in just a minute. But what's always good for the goose is not all. What they used to say, what's good for the goose is always good for the gander. That's not true, right?
Yeah.
That's just not true, folks. In fact, I mean, even in traditional Chinese medicine, even in Ayurvedic medicine, your physiology, your body type is primarily the first place that we start to understand how your health is faring. We can't start any place unless we understand you personally, right? So one size doesn't fit all. Never has, never really will. So,
yeah,
right, understanding, right, that we live in a culture that looks at polygyny as the abnormal reality. Except Utah. I know somebody's gonna say it in here. What about Utah?
Well, I mean,
right.
that's I mean, Utah is part of the reason why I got such. I mean, look, we might have some listeners in Utah. I'm not trying to, say anything about anybody's culture, but
no,
it's been some strange, some different things that's occurred, and that's kind of the face of polygyny in America.
Well, let's give the folks most folks. Some folks might know this.
Yeah.
Polygyny there, right, is under the auspices of Mormonism.
Yep.
Right. Do you know who the founder of Mormonism is?
I forget his name.
Joseph Smith.
Mm-hmm.
For the folks that don't know, two things for folks that don't know about Mormons, right? Mormons actually have what in their like temples, that was called a meditation room. Number one, it blew my mind when they showed it to me. I'm like, whoa, like, are you serious? Didn't even, right? You'd never know, right? Number two, their founder, Joseph Smith, actually studied a subject in his day and age called pyramidology.
Mm-hmm.
You can look it up, right? And was quite familiar with ancient Kemet, So kind of strange, right?
Yeah.
That they have their own state, their own learning institution, and they're allowed to practice a marital system that is foreign to the majority of most Christians, right? And they're actually still considered Christians, for the most part, the Church of Latter-day Saints, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just little things to consider, right? Maybe somebody's practicing, notice something that you don't know, right? And they kind of put that to the side, tell you. But nonetheless, back to the subject at hand. When we're looking at a chart and understanding how to see if this person is built for this type of marital system, we have to look to find something that is going to bring them to a level to desire, to a level where they want to desire marriage so bad they will go beyond the circumstances and achieve something that is out of the norm. If that makes sense. Right. Because in order to achieve something out of the norm, you have to have great desire, don't you?
Yeah.
You have to have an insatiable need to get something done. Right. And that need has to be facilitated in an expedient way. Right. Now, when we go to the Eastern cultures, and I'm talking about, when I say Eastern, I consider African Eastern, right? For some folks may not, I do, right? It is traditionally Eastern, right?
Yeah.
Their approach, when you look at a person, let's say we're looking in Nigeria, right? And we look at a chart. We're not going to look for the same factors. because we're not the cultural purview of this is not going to even be close to being the same. Polygyny is very well accepted in Nigeria, right? Very well accepted in Ghana, right? This is not foreign to the African mind or the Eastern mind for the most part, right? So we need to look at things from a different perspective. If someone comes to me, I can actually look at it from a Western perspective in their chart, just the same way I'd have to do it the reverse here. I could do it the reverse there, because I'm going to automatically know that it's inbuilt into this society. So I already know that I'm looking at certain things, the 7th and 11th. Well, we'll get into what those planetary interactions are, but they're going to be almost where I don't even have to do certain I don't have to perform certain research, because it's already embedded into the person's mindset. That's how you begin to really read the chart and read the person's understanding of a person's mind. So, for example, if I know this person is in China, right? They're Asian, they're Chinese, right? I'm not going to read marriage and children. I'm not going to read the 5th house from the same perspective. You know why, right? Because they have a law that states that if they have children beyond a certain number, they're breaking the law. So the 5th house is going to be read completely different. Jupiter is going to be read completely different.
Yeah.
In regards to children. So you have to read it differently. Right? Every culture has some biases or some differences, right? In some regard. But, and am I making sense so far? Where we're going with this?
Yes, you're making perfect sense. I mean,
okay, good. I just want to make sure we're there.
Yeah.
So, right. When we look at Western, just to say generally speaking in a chart, let's first of all establish what you want to see or look for in a chart to understand if a person is built or can sustain marriage in some degree, right? Because you have to have that in order to be able to sustain polygyny, right? You have to. Well, the first planet we look to in a chart, right, is Venus, right? Obviously, right? Because it is the planet of so-called conjugal love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Matrimony, marriage, right? Affection, and so forth. So you have to see if Venus is strong, right? In a chart for men and women, right? And so looking at a chart, you want to make sure that Venus is not harmed in some way. When I say harmed, you want to make sure that primarily there's 2 houses that she doesn't, primarily 2 you don't want it to be in. And I'm saying that this to say it's not always the case, because there's always exceptions to every rule, right? There are times that the chart can be amended or the placement can be amended by other placements that will offset that. So it's not always the case, but you have to kind of use it in a general sense of the word. And then you kind of take it from there and start to apply it in a very specific sense. But in the general sense, and what we're talking about is called a karaka, or an indicator. You look for Venus as the indicator of a marriage in a chart, or a person's ability to hold a marriage down. The reason is because Venus naturally rules Libra, which is the 7th sign, and it's the person's ability really to keep a promise.
Yeah.
Right? A little secret so people understand why we look at Venus. Venus is your ability to keep a promise. Right. Right. It really is your ability to say, you know what, business is promise. Business is, when you do business, it's nothing but a promise. It's an exchange. The dollar bill that you hold in your hand is a promissory note.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you have to relate the two to understand why Venus would be related to marriage in a chart. Right. She has the power, the ability to hold her word as true and to make sure that what she does is going to be continued the next day and the next day and the next day. That's what marriage is. right? I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'll be here the next day. I promise.
Yeah.
Right? If a person can't hold their promise, then they can't hold a marriage. And the way we understand that is a marriage is nothing but a vow. That's what I'm really trying to get the people to understand, is that promise, when you say I do, when you say I promise to uphold, you say that in the vows, usually in the Western sense, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I promise, right? That's what it is. Right? So when we look at Venus in the chart and say, oh, okay, well, and this is a matter male or female, right? Yeah, can't keep a promise. So then we can say, okay, well then, we know you can't keep promises, so how many promises have you tried to make?
Yeah.
Right? And then it's like, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean? Right? I can see you made quite a few promises. Right? We can see that in the chart very easily. Right? But we also see if someone will keep that promise till death do us part, for real.
Yeah.
There are charts that are built that way. Not many, but there are. And those are the ones that are anchored very well in understanding who they are and what they are from birth. Meaning, marriage is a spiritual exercise in and of itself. It is. Don't get married if you're not ready to give 20 years. Don't.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not ready, if not willing to give 20 years of your life, don't get married. This is plain and simple. I can tell you that. And it doesn't even matter if you like or dislike anything. That's not even the point. Because no matter what you like, you're going to learn to dislike at some point in that relationship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Saturn has to make at least 2 squares, right? Or a square in an opposition, and then beginning to make another square in order for you really to learn the value of the relationship and who you're dealing with. You have to be tested at least 2 times for Saturn to say, this is bona fide. Right? You learn your lesson. You grew up. You matured. You handle responsibility, right? All the things that go along with, right, that marriage in and of itself. So when you understand that, that's what the first thing you look for is, can the person keep a promise? Planetary placements are going to reveal that. They're going to be revealed through sign placements in a certain way. Not always, but in a certain way. Yeah, people say, what about a debilitated Venus? What about marriage? People with debilitated Venuses get married every day.
Yep.
And sustain happy marriages. So it's not all true.
Mm-hmm.
But in that marriage, there's going to be some very key things that you're going to notice, but it may not break the marriage because everyone's make or break is different. Right? Some people might not mind a woman that is constantly nitpicking you, right? But at the same time, that man that gets it might drive him crazy. It just depends on how his chart is built as well. So it's not always clear cut that just because a planet is in this sign or in this house, is it going to fail in marriage? But there are some clear rules that we know it usually yields the case. Right? Venus in the 6th house is primarily one of those. Now, I've seen charts with Venus in the 6th house that have had substantial, long-term, healthy, viable marriages. But it's not usual. There has to be some exceptional placements with Venus in the 6th house to be substantiated to have that happen. And Venus in the 12th house as well. That's another one. Venus in the 12th house means the person is going to like a private marriage.
Yeah.
They're going to like a private relationship. Their relationship is best handled behind closed doors. That's not room for polygyny.
Yeah.
Polygyny is very public. Right? Venus in the 6th house means that the person is going to have an imbalance when it comes to Venusian things. So they might need a lot of attention, or might need a lot of affection, or might need a lot of things that really kind of imbalance the relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They might have addictions with Venus in the 6th house. Right? So these are just things that we just notice quickly. Yep. Could be an issue here. Right? The other thing is, for a woman, we look at Mars. Mars, we need to look at, is it healthy? Is it viable? Right? Because that's the type of man she's going to attract.
Yeah.
Right? And people say, what about Jupiter? Yeah. I know. Right? But remember, everything I'm saying to you is based on the society you live in. You live in a Western society. You don't look to Jupiter to find the man first in this society. If you do, you're going to be betrayed.
Yeah.
You're going to be fooled by trying to find Jupiter as the husband. It doesn't work that way. Mars is a dead giveaway in this society. So Mars will show the details of a man and a woman's chart, how she handles the male energy, how the male energy comes to her. Right? And so, literally, if a woman's Mars is challenged, she can't handle the pressure of a man.
Yeah.
Because her own innate need for self-protection will overcome and overrule his natural desire to protect. This is how we read a chart, folks. Real quick, down and dirty.
Yeah.
Right. Mars in the 12th house, same rule. Mars in the 6th house is a different rule for different reasons, but Mars in the 12th house and Mars in the 8th house, those are planetary placements, especially Mars in the 12th. It's one you definitely want to just be mindful of as far as long-term marriages are concerned. Why? Because Mars in the 12th house, there's a specific aspect that Mars produces. It's called the 4-8 aspect. Mars produces 8 houses away from himself. If you count from the 12th to the 7th, 12 to the 6th, that's 7. One more from the 6th is the 7th house, which is the house of marriage. So just quick little things that you should note when you're looking at a prospective person for polygyny, to know these are dead giveaways.
Yeah.
Mars in the 7th house is a no-no for polygyny. Right? Mars in the 7th house is almost, not always, almost a no-no for monogamy. So you have to just read this with a real fine-tooth comb.
Wouldn't Mars in the 7th, that's Marana Krakastana, right?
Run that by me again.
Marana.
Yeah, that's a Marana. Yeah, that is. Yeah. Both the 2nd and the 7th house are Marana Stanas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Death houses, right?
Yeah.
Definitely so, right? But Mars in the 7th house just denotes a real rough ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
In marriage. And I don't care how well it's placed. How about that?
No, I've seen it with people
right.
with Mars exalted and just don't.
Just marriage is just not it, man.
Yeah,
the karma is not bequeathed to them in this life, typically, unless they become a divine being. Now, when you're a divine being, you can do whatever you so choose at that point, because you've realized a certain level of spiritual development. But those are the exceptions to the rule. Most of the time, when you see Mars in the 7th, it's just a dead giveaway, right? So you just don't want to even go there to even talk about a polygynous anything, right? In that regard.
Yeah.
Let's talk about monogamy as the scientific height of realization and spiritual realization for anybody with Mars in the 7th. Monogamy is it, right? If you can do that. But when you have a nice solid chart where Mars is not being interfered with or interfering anything else, because Mars can also interfere with other planets that will also render null and void any type of polygynous anything. Mars influencing the moon primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mars can influence the moon and be aspected by certain things that will still nullify or subdue, right, or quell those specific malefic influences between the moon and Mars. But if there's no influences that subdue that or subjugate that, then you can pretty much bet your bottom dollar that Mars with moon is not going to go well for polygyny. Right? Just doesn't go well. Unless they may play a different role, but that's a fine-tuned thing, right? That's not a general rule. We're talking general rules right now.
Yeah.
Right. So those are just general basics. That's just general basic stuff for marriage, and of course the extension of marriage, which is, polygyny, that type of marriage. But now we got to find out, well, what is the catalyst for the strange behavior to the West of why someone, that's some strange stuff. Why do you want to have more than one? Right?
Yeah.
What would cause someone to, oh, that's just strange to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, there's something that does that in the astrological sense of things. And so one of the players, not the only one, but one of the main players is the fellow we discussed just last week, I believe, right? Is Rahu.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Good old Rahu, right?
Troublemaker.
Yeah. I like him. Right. He's cool with me. I paid my dues. No, I'm just playing. I can bet through my Rahu period. We're good, right?
That reminds me, we need to get them t-shirts, man.
No doubt, we do. But Rahu, the bad boy on the block, right? He's the one that really sets it off in the sense of polygyny, right? And there's just so many different ways Rahu can influence a chart that can produce the phenomenon of the need, right, for someone to have a out of the norm life in some aspect, right?
Yeah.
Because it's healthy for society see, Rahu, the supreme being in his infinite wisdom, designed Rahu to bust up the monotony.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's designed to create things that make you, let's say literally think outside the box.
Yeah.
Because without that, right? Let's say Rahu didn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I wouldn't be talking astrology right now.
Nah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be talking astrology. Those listeners wouldn't be listening to some culture that is archaic at best, right?
Yeah.
And something that was designed thousands upon thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
Right. We wouldn't be discussing. That's Rahu's gift, to take you out of the Christian paradigm and to bring you to the African paradigm, which is now foreign to the reality in which you live.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got Rahu hanging all over me from a child, man.
Right. So it's not so right. It's anti-culture.
Yeah.
To the culture you're in.
Yeah.
But it's not anti-culture.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's just anti to the culture you're in.
Yeah.
So right. Polygyny is not anti-African. It's anti-Western.
Yeah.
But we live in a Western culture, and time and space makes us realize that. And then it's like, oh, well, yeah. Now you understand that what you're looking at is out of the norm. It's not something that is the normal person's gonna. You walk up to a person and ask the average person, how many people do you know that practice polygyny? They're gonna say, for the most part, most people don't know of that many people.
Oh yeah, like who was I talking to? I was talking to somebody, and they were talking about the whole kind of same sex marriage thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we got in the discussion of basically if other groups fight for things outside of themselves, and I was saying that, well, if same-sex marriage, really what they should have fought for is marriage amongst all consenting adults. And the person was like, well, what's the other type of marriage?
Right. What
was the other type of marriage?
Like what?
Yeah,
I mean, and to think about it from that perspective, they will legalize homosexual marriage,
mm-hmm.
but still outlaw or not legalize polygyny.
Yeah.
That's how taboo it is. So
it was.
I'm not talking about anybody's sexual preferences, folks. That is not my thing. I'm not here to ride on or jump on or pull anyone off anyone's bandwagon. Right?
Yeah.
That's your prerogative. What I'm saying is that the mindset of a nation or the mindset of a people to look at something that is naturally taboo in most cultures and around the world, and this is known around the world, not just Western culture, but even in Eastern culture, homosexuality is something that is taboo.
Yeah.
But to legalize that as a viable form of two people being able to file tax returns together and to be able to benefit as if they're in a monogamous relationship, but not to approve a relationship where there is an interaction between male and females just multiplied, shows serious Christian bias.
Oh yeah, it was back before same-sex marriage got passed. It was a panel on CNN, I think, and one of the guys was talking, and he was like, if we let same-sex marriage get through, then people are going to start marrying their dogs, and then people are going to start marrying their hands, and worse, polygamy.
That's the last of it, right?
That's exactly what he said. I was like, oh wow,
that's amazing.
That's deep.
That's deep. That's deep. That's some deep rooted. Boy,
I'll find that clip
not.
and post it on Instagram.
That's funny. But I mean, it just shows, right? These things are really culturally perceived, and so Rahu is the one that literally pushes the cultural boundary.
Yeah,
he represents the ring past 9, right? So in order for someone to do this in this culture, you want to find Rahu in connection to something that deals with a major aspect of the person's chart or some factor that ties it in to marriage, either through the 7th house, the 7th lord, and or Venus. And an aspect from Rahu can also produce the same effect, depending on how tight the aspect is.
Yeah.
So there is the formula, generally speaking. Now, to really solidify polygyny, you want to make sure that the 7th house / 7th lord interacts with the 11th house / 11th lord in some way. And there's many ways. What's called sambandha, right, or binding or connecting in a chart, right? Because sambandha can be through various ways. It can be through, right, a connection through aspect, through nakshatra ruler, right, through navamsha or dina. It's just different ways they can connect, right? Yeah. So if they're connected in some way, and there has this admixture of Rahu within this process, polygyny is usually very acceptable and doable within that person's paradigm or mental way of thinking of things, right? Their way of understanding life. That wouldn't be outside the norm to them. In fact, they would revel in it because that Rahu factor produces rebellion in the society in which it is, in which it's placed. So that is a necessary key, right, to do it. What you want to also look for to go counter that is influences from Saturn. Saturn will usually deny polygyny. Why do you think that might be?
Maybe, I mean, Saturn is kind of tradition, or, it's...
Brother, you said it, I didn't, right? Saturn is very traditional, right? In the sense that it does not like to go beyond the routine of things. If Saturn is influencing one of those factors that we just talked about, right, you definitely want to just kind of, maybe not.
Now, what if Saturn is the seventh lord?
Then you want to look for Saturn interact with the 11th and Rahu still.
Mm-hmm.
In some way. So let's say Saturn. Okay, let's talk. So let's say Saturn is the seventh lord. There's only two ascendants we could be talking about.
Yeah, right? Leo and Cancer.
You said which one?
Leo and Cancer.
Right. Right. So then we know we've kind of already narrowed it down to Leo and Cancer. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer, we know, automatically shouldn't be married until after the age of 30.
Yeah.
Right. So now we can, and I'm saying there's always exceptions to the rule. Right. But Cancers typically have it worse. Right. In marriage than many other ascendants. Because they have to learn lessons first before they dive into marriage. They just do.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't work well for them at an early age. I'm talking about early age. Early, like 20s, 19, 17, 18, 16, or 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. It's going to be challenges. Saturn has to almost make its first return. Then they can marry successfully.
Oh, yeah. It
has to be on that verge.
That's a beyond truth statement right there.
Right. Leo's a little bit different, but Leo should still wait till at least 25, 26 to marry. And just because Saturn rules the seventh house, it just puts... See, the design for these types of ascendants is different from other ascendants. And I'm not going to get into too much about what that means. But just know, whatever Saturn rules typically is where you have to learn the most karma.
Yeah.
Right? And if you think about Cancer and Leo, you'll understand why. Right? So we know that seventh house is going to be one of those two ascendants. Right? For a Saturn rule. So then we can pretty much say, well, then we're going to look to see if Saturn is influenced in some way by Rahu. Right? In various ways. Right?
Yeah.
The seventh lord is going to be in a place. The ruler of the seventh can be influenced by Rahu. That will produce the effect.
Yeah.
Right? There's direct and indirect influences that will still yield it. So you want to look, right? And there's just different ways you'll know, right? If the ninth house is affected by Rahu, this can also produce a polygynous purview.
Why the ninth house?
Well, the ninth house is the house that we usually produce, that produces our spiritual foundation.
Mm-hmm.
When the ascendant lord is interacting with the ninth house is an ascendant lord, right? In some way, like that person will grow up religious, right? The second house and the ninth house, right? So religion or spirituality is a primary indicator of what we're looking at, or to see. We want to see the spirituality of a person. Just look to the ninth.
Okay. Yeah.
Doesn't mean, right? They might be a Christian, but it's going to show you how they're a Christian. But it'll also show you if they're not a Christian. If Rahu is there. If Saturn is there.
Yeah.
Because Saturn in the ninth creates what's called an apostate. One that goes against the mainstream of their religion. Rahu definitely does, without a doubt. And anytime I see Rahu or Ketu in that axis, man, it's some way, somehow, some shape, some form, they are not in the norm of spiritual thinking for the most part, as far as what everyone else does. So that alone, when you have a different spiritual purview, that is going to change everything.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to say, okay, well now that's not out the box for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm good with that. No, yeah. All right. I'm arrhythmic when it comes to the normal spiritual purview of things. So there's just different things we can see to see up that person can handle it, or no, this person cannot. So those are little things that you just begin to look at real quickly. Rahu, if he's conjunct Mars for a woman in her chart, she's definitely gonna like a man that's going to present that into her life, even though at sometimes at her own peril.
Mm-hmm.
Because Rahu creates, right, sudden, unexpected things. Sometimes I've seen Rahu with Mars. The person finds out their husband's homosexual.
Mm. You said Rahu with Mars?
For a woman's chart, yes. Many times I've seen it.
Mm.
They don't know why. Another one, folks, just a little tidbit. And I hate to be the bearer of the truth, but the way they say the truth, teller usually has very few friends.
Yeah.
And that is true, right? Mars retrograde for a woman's chart is detrimental for marriage.
Mm.
I don't care what kind of marriage. Period. I can tell you it happens 70 to 80% of the charts I've seen, my friend. Mars retrograde for a woman. Unless it's debilitated. Which causes the effect to reverse.
Yeah.
That Mars is in any kind of other dignity, it's bad news for marriage. It's just the law, because the martial energy is meant to be externalized, especially for a woman. And people say, why not for a man? Because a man's he's naturally martial energy anyway. So it's not detrimental to him for marriage. But for a woman, it's rough. And I can tell you, man, it's just crazy how many times I've seen it. Over and over and over. It can be overcome because there's other factors that can literally compensate, where it will give the woman. And let's also talk about this before we get off. Gender role integrity. That's something really has been that is now becoming taboo, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Gender role integrity. Oh, you misogynist. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Men are oriented towards hot tasks. Period.
Yeah.
Women are oriented towards cooler tasks. Period. Yes, there are women that can do hotter things, but they cannot sustain those hotter things as long as a man can.
No.
Just things that go with being in this body, right? And we think that because our mind can think something differently, our body will follow. Well, gravity's still in effect, despite you're thinking you can overcome it, right? Laws are still laws. And so understanding that gender integrity is key and crucial to understanding a chart and a relationship, right? There's just certain placements automatically that give us masculine women. And they're hard. I mean, unfortunately, they kind of, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't do well. Right?
Yeah.
For example, like, if in a woman's horoscope, let's say if the ascendant and the moon occupy male signs, right, or are associated with malefic planets, a lot of times a woman she's fierce.
Mm-hmm.
She's insubordinate. She ain't gonna bow. And I'm not saying bow as into bowing to a man. I'm saying bowing to the relationship itself. Like, no, I run this. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's a gender role integrity there that has to work if polygyny is to be viable for a long term. You can probably do it for a little bit, but long term wise, there has to be a male female counterpart.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, the same thing happens. But what about men? You know, if in a man's chart, if the ascendant and the moon occupy female signs, right? Sometimes it does work that way, right? So, you know, you just have to kind of gauge this, right? And really look at it for what it is and say, okay, is this something that can be matched? Now, the other thing is, and we won't be too much longer because this will be there's other things to add in that I haven't added in. But just the general matrix of it, you have to see the women's chart woman to woman, right? And in order to see woman to woman, the Mars aspect becomes even more crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, the Venus and Mars aspect become crucial, but Mars for a very specific purpose, in that if those women's two Mars are not interfacing in a certain way, you can bet your bottom dollar that's not going to be a happy marriage. The women's Mars should be synchronized in some way.
Mm.
The man and woman's Mars may not be so much so, but the woman, two women, the women, the sister wives have to be in sync, martially speaking. So they should be in opposition. They should be trying. They can even be in a 4-10 relationship to some degree.
Mm.
And those that study astrology know what I'm talking about. But you definitely don't want it to be in a 6-8 position or 2-12. You don't want that. Right? Because then that's automatically going to be contention. So there's just certain things that you want to look for in those aspects of the chart as well, considering all people meet the requirements that were originally talked about. That's why it becomes a very complex thing. Polygyny is complex.
Oh yeah.
You know, you're managing multiple things simultaneously. You know, it's not easy, greasy. But at the same time, the one thing I can tell you that is universal in all of it is there has to be a spiritual component in everybody's chart. It can't be mundane. This is not a this is, if you're doing it in the Western sense, it's a very spiritual exercise.
Yeah.
In the Eastern sense, it's very much practical. So, right, the spirituality piece becomes secondary because it's more oriented in and ingrained into society. Whereas in the West, it has to be more of a spiritual principle because you have to endure the onslaught and the resistance of society in doing something that is considered taboo. Right? And so that's why societies like Asara said, societies like the Hebrew Israelites, even some Islamic sects, kind of facilitate the groundwork for things to be done in that way, because you have to have some type of system to support it. Right?
Yeah.
Going rogue with this, y'all, is rough, right? Going rogue and say I'm polygynous, you better be really sharp and tight, right? Without a system, a spiritual system especially to support it, it's just very difficult. You know, and especially given all of the freedoms and the changes that are produced. I mean, you know, things change every month now. It seems like something is old. It was not even old. I mean, what's old now is considered, to me, old is like 4 or 5 years, and we're now 4 or 5 months or something old. It's just things have changed. So the way things are now, people can pick up polygyny and put it down in 2.3 seconds. They're done. You know what I mean? It's a fad.
Yeah.
Right. It's cute, right? I
post on the gram.
Yeah. Rahu rules fads.
Yeah.
It does. But Rahu also rules changes of consciousness as well. So, kind of the extremes of the same rule. But I would say for the most part, those are the primary. The moon is always a factor. And I didn't even mention the moon because those are the things that you always want to consider as the baseline of anyone's chart. If the moon is hammered, I don't care what it is you're going to do. It's going to be rough. School, education, a job, let alone a relationship. With the moon challenged, it's always going to be rough. Life is rough because the moon represents life itself. Right? In a chart. So, if you're seeing probably somebody's moon is hammered and you're saying, wow, it's in the 8th house with aspect this, conjunct this, and it's in this, and this, it's got all these things going on. And you say, well, what about polygyny? What about life?
Yeah.
Let's do that first. Let's start living first. Then we can talk about marriage. But polygyny is an exercise that is a mental exercise. It's not emotional. And that being said, we'll add the last piece of the puzzle in to the equation. Last piece of the puzzle is the signs, right? And so the signs are key. And that when you're looking at signs, you definitely don't want someone to be overwhelmed in one type of sign, period. But you definitely want to watch out for water signs in regards to being heavily weighted. And when you're heavily weighted in water, the propensity to become jealous is higher, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep it real, folks. I'm not going to candy coat this, right? 2 of the most jealous signs in the zodiac are Scorpio and Cancer. Specifically of Cancer, Ashlesha, which is 16 degrees, 40 minutes to 30 degrees. Cancer. It's the very end of Cancer.
Yeah.
And so that aspect is literally, right, governed by a serpent, the entity called Sarpa, right, or Shashesh, right, is a serpent that entwines, right, and squeezes and holds. Well, the Cancer has claws, right?
Yeah.
For gripping and holding, right? Now, that portion of Cancer is extremely jealous. And the sign of Scorpio itself is jealous. Right? So, given that, you gotta be careful because you won't see it coming. Right? You think that it's all good and everything's cool, but you're not paying attention to these water signs are very, very, very protective.
Mm-hmm.
Very territorial.
Sting you. When you see the stinger coming, ping.
Well, yeah, and the Cancer will grip you till it squeezes you to death.
Yeah.
Right. So you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what I got into. What is this? And then I've seen people with stellium. I mean, I've had people come to me with at least 3 or 4 planets in Ashlesha alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I can almost guarantee when I mention relationship, it's the same story. How long did you squeeze the man or woman till they broke? They like, what? You squeezed them to death. Well, they did that. Yeah. But it was you holding on to the point where you couldn't, till you squeezed the life force out of them. And then the relationship, yeah, you're right. They usually admit it very quickly.
Yeah.
There's other zones in the zodiac that are rough, right? Maritally speaking, right? And so those are other, I mean, when as an astrologer, then you begin to learn, these zones, right? Like if someone has planets, especially like Venus or the seventh lord at 10 degrees Scorpio, they're going to be completely overtaken by sexual urges. And I've seen it over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Even 9 degrees, 11 degrees Scorpio, yeah. Straight up and down. If a planet, let's say the person's seventh moon, let's say moon, Venus, or seventh lord is at 3 degrees, they have a very strong propensity to be married for a very long time. They can endure relationships. So, and it's almost like they're opposite ends of the same spectrum. One's 3 degrees, one's 10 degrees.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just saying, like, there's different zones, right? Aries, 14 degrees. Man. Yeah. 17 degrees. Yeah. Rough areas for marriage.
Yeah.
So you see, it just depends, right? There's just so many nuances, but you can still pretty much take what I've told you and apply it and see and test it and see if it doesn't work. Right? It might be, I've seen, because people say, well, Venus in the 8th house. 8th house Venus is great. Actually, it's good for marriage. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Because a person is going to, the person's in-laws is going to love them.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Like, very, yeah. Yeah.
Venus in the 8th house, their family, the family, their husband's family or their wife's family loves them. Now, unless there's some other aspects going on, right? And again, provided that they're both of the same racial or economic background, these are other factors, or for all intents and purposes, everything the same, then Venus in the 8th house, then the person's, they're going to stay married for a very long time, right? They're going to keep their promise, right? Trust and believe, right? So, and they may even stay married for a very long time and then divorce, but they will be married for at least 10, I would say at least 10 years. And if they divorce, it'd probably be 20 to 25 years. They just stay, people with Venus in the 8th house stay married for a very long time, right? Just kind of the way it works. So, again, you want to look for certain just kind of key rhythmic patterns. If you see a lot of planets in Cancer and Scorpio, doesn't mean it won't work. It just means there's got to be a lot of work involved to make it happen, right? And the thing is once you overcome those things, those signs actually become the most loyal. They'll never give up because they've overcome those challenges of insecurities, which Cancers can many times have, and the overcome the need for possession many times what Scorpios can have, right? Because Scorpios literally like to possess, right? That's their thing. So, nonetheless, I think we'll leave it at that. I think we've had a fairly decent show, and I think the next time we come on, we're gonna have more filler in, some more information for the people, some things we got coming up. So definitely tune into the next show. It'll be a polygyny part 2. So we'll kind of fill in some other things, talk about some other aspects, and kind of tie it all in.
Indeed. Yeah. So, as you can see, especially in a modern context, it's a it's a complex situation and in its own. And looking at it astrologically can be a bit complex as well. But want to remind you all that this episode was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Caliprucia Astrology and our patrons. And I want to, like I said, shows like this or, different things that you may want to hear. Patreon is the best way to get that done, because you really, get the opportunity to really engage with us on a different level. And we really do take, your contributions and stuff into consideration and, tie it into the show. And like I said, there's even an option out there for you to even be on the show. So I definitely encourage you all to go check us out on Patreon and, help us to, push you forward and help us, take this show to another level as well. All right. This is definitely a great show. Great perspective on it. Indeed. So I know a lot of y'all going to be sitting there looking at your charts and stuff like that in the comments or in the DMs asking us, man, is this what about, all that good stuff. And that's all good. But, it's a, marriage in general is a very serious institution. So you definitely want to make sure that you got your head in the right place, regardless of what type of marriage it is. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and close it out. We went over a little bit, but it's all good. Brother Rod, you got anything you want to say before we go ahead and close it down?
Nah, folks, just definitely spread the word, get it out there. We've got some new followers. You all have interacted with me, and definitely much appreciated. Much appreciated to the folks that support us on Patreon. As this grows and you all help us grow, we can get it. We can make this even bigger and better, and bring on stuff and people in different formats that can make this quite interesting. So again, thank everybody. I want to thank everybody that has contributed, and again, get the word out. Send it out to your family and folks that are interested in these kind of topics.
Indeed. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we will be back next week with another great show for you. In the meantime, make sure everybody, you say stay safe, healthy, vibrant, and we'll see you all next week. All right. Peace.